Alright, Bill Henshaw here again, YouTube channel, Winning Court, and more recent items in the news. And I just saw the other day that in the House they passed a bill calling for a $15 minimum wage. That's quote unquote dollars since they're undefined. Of course, it hasn't gotten to the Republican Senate as of yet. When it does, see you later, it isn't going to pass. And it shouldn't. I mean, what authority, and from day one, this goes back to the New Deal and Roosevelt, from day one, what authority does Congress have to pass any laws pursuant to minimum wage? And where does it come from? This is how it relates to the Constitution, because you find out, you read cases of the Supreme Court at the time, one case in particular called the Gold Clause case, Norman v. B&O Railroad, 294 U.S. 240. And they there sustained, by a 5-4 vote, a law passed by Congress that did away with the gold clause. So people who had invested gold and silver in earlier times with corporations, and in this case the B&O Railroad, with the reasonable expectation to get gold and silver back, when the time came, were out of luck. Now you find out in this case some interesting things here, because the dissenters, the four horsemen, in their dissent said, that the issue of the president defining the dollar is not before us, because Congress delegated the authority to Roosevelt to define the standard dollar. And they must have done this in Roosevelt's capacity as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. And this comes out of the damn Federal Reserve Act, 1913, 12 U.S.C. 95 A and B. I've talked about this. And they simply can't delegate that kind of authority. The only way they can do this, and here's the killer argument on it, is if the government assumes that we all have birthright citizenship and we don't have any rights to go into a judicial court and question the acts of our agents. Now, how did that happen? As state citizens, just sanguineous state citizens by blood, not soil, we have a right in the first instance to get into a judicial court and ask questions like that. Hasn't been there before the 904s, except for that one time, and that's what they did with it. And there are probably some very interesting memos that flew around the chambers when this case was in there. I'd love to see them, but you probably don't have any access to them. I mean, after 80 years, who knows? So these kind of questions come up, and you say, my goodness, how can all this be happening? But this is why, because they think we all are their citizens and their slaves and their chattel property, and they can do with us what they want. That's what has to stop. And I think the new stuff I'm just putting in now is going to play a big role in doing that, because we can actually do it. Instead of having a minimum wage, what you do is you have gold and silver coin, and we get back as close as we can to the capitalist society we're supposed to have. That's a big deal, because if that happens, now, and not only that, the other thing I want to do away with is a lot of corporate involvement in business. When I was growing up, we had a lot of mom and pop stores and this and that and the other. And I'm not saying corporations don't have their place. What I am saying, that as people, growing up in communities and in cities and counties, that we should have the primary authority to set up businesses, for like grocery stores and things like that, personal services, barbershops, opticians, you name it, be run by people like that. Let them make an honest living doing it. We don't need four eyes out there, the corporation going across the country with this kind of crap doing this stuff. That would be a big improvement to start out with. So there's a lot that goes into this issue, with the minimum wage, but it just doesn't exist. And then with the minimum wage, and you got the president defining a dollar, you pass the minimum wage this year for $15, and the president redefines the dollar next year to make that virtually worthless. Of what value is the legislation? And here, by the way, it's another point I want to make that's related, not directly, but think about this one for a minute, with landlord-tenant. And I encourage people, by the way, that are in this situation as a tenant to come to me, and we'll talk about it, because landlords think they have a property right in their real estate, but the government tells us as taxpayers We have a zero interest in our time and labor, and thus they can tax us out of existence without a need for an administrative hearing. My question to landlords is, what's the factual foundation and legal basis for your property right in your real estate? Answer that one if you can. Meanwhile, like my videos, send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll send you information on my materials. Tell others, and we'll discuss more in the next video. Thank you.